From the Detroit Free Press, I'm Robin Chan with today's Voice Briefing. It's Tuesday, January 13th, 2026.
This is Todd Spangler, Washington correspondent with the Detroit Free Press. President Trump will make his first visit of the new year to Michigan on Tuesday, speaking to the Detroit Economic Club. The visit coincides with this week's start to the Detroit Auto Show. Last time Trump spoke to the Economic Club, it was during the 2024 campaign. That night, he proposed a tax break on interest on new car loans, something he got passed through Congress last year. He also made headlines saying the rest of the U.S. would, quote, be like Detroit if he didn't win. Of course, he did win, so it's up to the listener to decide what that's meant for the U.S. We don't know what news, if any, Trump plans to make in his speech at 2 p.m. Tuesday, but he will almost certainly argue that his efforts to undo a push for electric vehicles will help Detroit automakers in the future. But auto companies are facing lots of questions about 2026 and what Trump's worldwide tariffs on imported autos and auto parts will mean for the industry. If he were to bring news that he's relaxing those tariffs, it would likely be welcomed greatly by executives.
I'm John Wisely. I cover higher education at the Detroit Free Press. The University of Michigan has a new president. Syracuse Chancellor and President Kent Syverud will take over at U of M this summer, taking on one of the most visible and challenging jobs in the state. Syverud is 69. He earned a master's degree in economics at U of M and a Juris Doctorate at Michigan's Law School. After the Board of Regents voted unanimously to approve him, Syverud struck a humble tone. He joked that he's a better listener than a public speaker. Wearing a navy blue blazer and a blue and gold striped tie with block M's on it, he recounted arriving in Ann Arbor the first time as a scholarship student. He said he got off a Greyhound bus in front of the Michigan Union, carrying a single suitcase. He crossed State Street and said, quote, "My life was changed," end quote. He later met and married his wife, Dr. Ruth Chen, at Michigan. Syverud also credits doctors at Michigan Medicine with saving the life of one of his sons, who was born with a congenital condition that required a rare surgery. Michigan will pay Syverud a base salary of $2 million, a sizable increase from his predecessor, Santa Ono, who earned about $1.3 million. Regents praised his record, his temperament, and his ties to the school. Regent Mike Beam served on the search committee and said, quote, "This is more than a job to him, it's a calling." For more on Michigan's new president and the process of selecting him, please visit freep.com.
Hey there, everybody. This is Omari Sanko for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. On this week's episode of our podcast, The Pistons Post, Bryce Simon and I were joined by Keith Smith to discuss their hot start and break down their finances and assets ahead of the February 5th trade deadline. Here's a quick snippet of our conversation. Keith, can you just give us a general breakdown of just kind of what the Pistons are working with from an asset standpoint? Obviously, they have that trade exception. And then, just from a financial standpoint as well, how much headroom they have.
They've got that $14 million trade except 14.1 and change trade exception. So that's a pretty good size trade exception. They have all of their own draft picks. So they've got all their own first rounders. They've got a couple extra seconds to work with. So they're in pretty good shape there. So those are just nice to have, is just that extra sweetener in a deal, little capital to kind of move in there. And then I think one of the key parts is for the Pistons, I have them a little over $19 million away from the luxury tax. They're miles from the first apron and second apron. That's not even a conversation. They would struggle to even put themselves in a position. But just for example, let's say a player makes a non-taxpayer mid-level, lands in the Pistons' lap where it's, hey, we want to send him into that trade exception that you have. And they say, we're going to waive a player just to create the roster spot. They could use that trade exception and still have $5 million in clearance under the luxury tax. Like, they are really, really good shape with all that stuff. Where a couple other teams, whether it's a hard cap at the apron or the second apron, they've got problems. That's kind of where the Knicks are. The Cavs are a second apron team. It'd be very hard for them to do anything. Handful of other teams we only get a little bit of room under the luxury tax to do something. Detroit has incredible flexibility going into the trade deadline.
You can hear that full conversation in this week's episode of The Pistons Post, which is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, you can find our latest coverage on freep.com/sports.
Find more from the Detroit Free Press on freep.com. That's FREEP.com. Thank you for listening, and you'll hear more from us tomorrow.